Welcome to Brookside Chats. I'm your host today, Brooklyn, and today I am joined with
Taco here.
And our guests are
Landry
and Aria.
So, growing up, I always remember back in my Saturday weekends, just going and watching some cartoons and getting excited to get some donuts and stuff like that. And I was thinking about it, does my memories kind of lie to me in a way, and is nostalgia or that nostalgic feeling good for people? What do you guys think?
Yes, and then no. That's it. Conversation done.
All right, good episode, everyone.
Dun, 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 dun. So, why do you think yes or no, though?
Well, you're looking back at your childhood through rose-tinted lenses.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at the good stuff. I mean, the Saturday morning cartoons is just a great example because that is one day out of the week, half the day that you're looking at in awe. And Saturday morning cartoons were fun. I remember that too.
Mm-hmm.
But what about church on Sunday, school on Monday, doing homework?
Parents probably infighting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or a very hazy view.
Was I watching cartoons to forget about the fact that my parents hate me for being a failure? Who knows?
God, it's too hard. Okay.
I think definitely with just being a child too, it's a simpler time because you don't, you're less developed. You don't realize exactly what's going on in the world. You're just focused on what am I going to do for fun today, pretty much.
Right.
I think it's you. At least as long as you don't have traumatic childhoods like Brooke,
Yes.
you'll see more just the happy moments. That's the ones you remember, anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's it's kind of the innocence that comes with being a child, but also at the same time, yeah, like Landry said, you remember the Saturdays, but I think that's kind of, for some people, a defense mechanism of not remembering all the other parts, kind of hiding it in the back or distorting that perception of what it was, which I know, Brooke, you're going to talk about a little bit more on that topic. But I think for me, when I look back at my childhood as, growing up in mid to, gosh, I don't know, say 90s, because I'm 98, so I'm not 90s, but 2005, 2006, 2004, yeah, I enjoyed the Saturday morning cartoons. I enjoyed some aspects of school, but there's a lot of parts that were rougher and challenging. Being a kid of immigrants also, an immigrant myself, there's definitely a lot of struggles with that. And I find myself, as I get older, more and more, as much as I want to reflect on that, it's becoming more blurry, and it's not as clear. The kind of the struggles and the rough parts, it's becoming more smoother now. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, looking at human psyche, with a little research what I've done is that memories tend to be kind of like a game of telephone. So the more you recall it over time, you'll start kind of fabricating or adding details that are this and that. For instance, we have a buddy of mine, and he always likes to bring up the story where I was wearing a suit and I was rolling up my arm sleeves at during the suit during it did. I won't deny it happened, but every time when he tells it, I always notice he always adds an extra detail, and it's just we were just all rap battling him, or oh man, it was just such a house. Oh, we just roasted him. He nearly cried out of the room, and it kept adding and adding to the details. And I was thinking to myself, I was wait a minute, none of that actually happened, or just just the excessive details.
I'm gonna cut him some slack for that one. I mean, that's not necessarily being recalling a memory. I think that's just being a good storyteller and making you the butt of the joke, which I think is generally acceptable.
Jeez.
I would agree with that. Yeah. We all do that to you, bro. We do it because we love you. But I get your point. Like I'll be like remembering something and talking with my parents or my sister about it, and they'll like have a different memory of that because they had a different perspective of it. And, you know, it's not always the same thing, and it'll definitely change as time goes on. But I think that's okay. Partly, it's not always a good thing to dwell on the past. Like you have to. I used to do that a lot. I used to dwell on the past. What I've been trying to do lately is, over the last couple of years, since starting college, really, has been trying to live more in the present. Not so much even in the future or the past, but just in the now. Yeah. And I think that's a good place to be. And yeah, my memories change, and there's some really good ones that I wish weren't changing, which you can help with, you know, journaling and stuff. There's like ways to go around that. But I think it's fine. Just
it helps to get like another point of view, like across just like what you were going through then and what you're going through now, because we all have different experiences over time. We all have different stuff, but like at the same time, I think like the game of like, you know, the telephone memories, basically, where you're just remembering but you add or like miss different details, like it does kind of convolute, or like it could like look at like a memory and maybe like totally blindside the negative things, or totally just blindside the positive things as well. I believe that nostalgia, though, it does have a little bit of like of a dopamine factor. It helps out with like kind of like, you know, happy memories, and but you know, at the same time, don't continue to dwell on the past, because if you keep dwelling on the past, you're not going to look towards the future. There's a phrase I always like to live by, and it's by the founder of Taoism and Master Lazé. You know, it basically goes along the lines of the past is the past. Don't dwell on it, because it will kind of lead to sorrow. Look towards the future and let things flow like time naturally does. And as you keep kind of like going through your life, you're gonna hit like your little points, and you're gonna have these bad memories. But don't keep like letting it like it impact you. You gotta keep going forward and keep going forward no matter what, because again, nature, time, it's always gonna keep moving.
It was beautiful, bro.
Oh, thank you. I've just been practicing that for like the last, like, I don't know, 2 minutes or so. So.
What, you weren't listening to the rest of us talk?
Oh. Well, when you guys were starting to roast me, I was just like, okay, time to find some new co-host.
That's your brain self-defense mechanism, though.
Does that mean I count as a co-host now?
You're an honorable co-host.
Yeah.
Honorable co-host?
Yeah.
I'm good with that one.
You're a Pojo or taco replacement. How about that?
Substitute.
There you go.
That's good enough. That's less commitment. Do I still get paid?
You get
Yes,
paid in donuts.
for like 20 cents or whatever.
20 cents.
Whatever.
How much has the podcast made so far?
$2.
$2. 20 cents is
That's a
good
little
chunk
too
of
much.
change.
I say bring it down a little, maybe.
Okay.
5 cents. Get like a
One hay penny. Some.
One hay penny.
We'll pay you
One
in.
sand dollar.
There you go.
There.
Honestly, if you could give me a physical hay penny, I would be totally satisfied.
We'll pay you in Shiba coin.
So do you think like, in terms of like problem solving, is nostalgia good for like that?
For problem solving?
Or like say like, you know, like reminiscing with the past for like, you know, things like politics, or just kind of like culture, or just kind of like all these different things with like society.
So you're talking about like
Like
moving to learn from the past to develop the future?
well, like for instance, I always hear this common phrase with a lot of comedians saying like, oh, back in the day, you know, people weren't so offended by this and this and this and this and that. Or, you know, back in the day, you know, the internet was such a great place and stuff like that. Or back in the day, yeah, like there was like no censors whatsoever, and you had internet was just the wild west.
I think it's a good idea to maintain a solid memory of the past. because I think, tradition is important, but not the be-all, end-all.
Yeah.
Agreed. Like, you need to learn your lessons from the past, and if you don't teach history, you're doomed to repeat it, sort of thing.
Exactly. Well, there's that, but there's also, you don't want to lose sight of the things that made the past good either. And granted, that's kind of been used in a negative way in recent years, because I literally said this in the side chat, but the slogan "Make America Great Again" refers to the eras of the 1950s and the 1980s, when it was an economically prosperous period that everybody associates with good times in a nostalgic way. I mean, you look at the art of the 1950s, where it's got this nuclear family. They're all clean-cut, attractive people who are well-dressed with 2 cars in the garage, and they're all making their microwave dinners and watching Ed Sullivan. Or you have people in the 1980s with their flashy clothes and watching MTV, and maybe it's a little more dysfunctional because punk rock exists, but it's still basically the same.
I have to disagree in some respects, because I think a lot of the MAGA movement, where you say that's drawn to the 50s, I believe that's more in the cultural aspects, where the policies are very against what they would be supporting, because in the 40s and as the Great Depression recovery, you had all these soldiers returning homes. They had the GI Bill and everything like that really created the middle class and created those economic conditions that you're talking about that they benefited so greatly out of. That was where the neighborhoods were built, where it was from the GI Bill and them being able to go to school and get trained up and make more money and everything like that.
Certainly, but I'm saying it's not a true version of nostalgia.
Exactly.
But that's what we're getting at. It's looking at it through rose-tinted lenses.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at the positive parts of this that you want to have, and they're associating it with sort of reactionary right-wing policies and culture.
Precisely.
And the cultural atmosphere that was present in the 1950s, where it was very anti-communist. You couldn't say anything too left-leaning or you'd be blacklisted.
Red Scare.
You had a
Red
very
Scare.
big Christian movement actually simultaneously.
Yeah, it started around then as well.
That's
And
where
then-
like under God for like the Pledge of Allegiance was actually put in place, which you don't really like kind of gloss over that. fact
Revivalism, evangelical revivalism.
One of my favorite things on this subject is the satanic panic of the 80s. I love this stuff. Do you know about that?
I read on Reddit a post recently that this town, I forgot where in America, but they were trying to get rid of their principal because she had a picture of herself with a Metallica poster. And they associated that with Satanism, and they were like, a school official should not be, showing that kind of imagery and running a school with her good Christian children.
That is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. There was a lot of stuff where they thought Dungeons and Dragons was going to corrupt the children.
Pokemon
Was going to corrupt the children. Harry Potter was going to corrupt the children.
Yeah, that's why I always
That was
love
a little
how
weird.
reactionaries always talk about cancel culture of the left, when literally the right has been the founders and most prevalent in cancel culture with, think of the children,
Mhm.
satanic panic, video games cause mass shootings and all that shit.
Right.
Like,
And I think a lot of that stems from a nostalgia for the 1950s period, because when you look at media from the time, kids respected their elders, and they were polite, and they said yes sir and yes ma'am, and they were seen and not heard, and they did their chores on time, and they were good Christian children. But that was never the case.
Pray every
Have
single
you
night.
seen the cartoons that came out of that era though? Tom and Jerry and some of the cartoons in Boomerang. I'm just like, how was this allowed on TV? It's,
a lot of slapstick humor and stuff like that.
they say SpongeBob is going to corrupt us. I mean, there's a lot of violence in those cartoons back in the day. Some sexualism or sexism as well.
Have you seen any of the cartoons from like before the 1940s and 50s though?
I think I've seen one
I wasn't
that was
around
like
that time.
They're
during.
pretty yikes.
They're pretty cool, honestly.
Really?
Cool.
Not in the,
Cool is one word
So,
for it.
I'm talking
alright.
about like Fleischer stuff, like Betty Boop and that kind of thing, where it was very edgy and psychedelic, and there were drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of weird, but Betty Boop was sexualized in a way. It's kind of interesting that the 1950s conservatism happened just after this period where art was getting a little edgier.
Yeah. Talking
And-
about the 20s, the roaring 20s.
Exactly. And now obviously I'm not talking about the racism, which was obviously present
Yeah,
at the
okay.
same time.
That's what I was thinking of first.
But
and foremost.
that was obviously wrong. It was always wrong. They just didn't realize it at the time. And I don't necessarily fault them for that.
I don't think it's a
because-
thing of realizing, because
It was just a
people
normal.
always knew racism was bad. It's just the problem I have with that is you're not realizing the people who the racist cartoons was portraying realized it was bad. It's not exclusive to the white people knowing it's bad, because there was white people who knew it was bad too. There's always been progressives who were fighting against systemic issues with minorities and
Sure.
racist depictions.
Propaganda and cartoons has always been a thing.
But until
Chinese, exclusion acts and
I remember this like.
Nazis and Jewish. It's always been a thing. Like there's a reason behind a lot of these and how they're portrayed and their stereotypes. But it's I think more of anything, it's a thing of cultural acceptance or societal acceptance.
Mhm.
At that time, it wasn't as outrageous back then as it is now. And we would talk about this, like some of the jokes in The Office would not fly today, but they were fine back then.
Mhm.
Maybe not fine, but they were allowed on TV.
Mhm.
But that wouldn't be the case. But that's society changing.
Yeah, more recently, like with some of the anti-trans portrayals, where it was every trans woman was a sex worker or just a dead body on a crime show.
Or just basically every time when they would discover
just
that
a
this
man in a
person,
dress.
yeah, they would discover like a person that is trans.
Oh,
They would just
yeah.
puke or like that.
Yeah.
That's all.
What
It was a
Law and
consistent
Order,
joke.
SVU,
Yeah.
a lot of those.
Yeah.
a lot of those.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it with Jim Carrey?
Ace Ventura.
Yes, Ace Ventura.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Or even more subtly, like Silence of the Lambs with Buffalo Bill, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, the serial killer.
Yeah.
it's definitely a little more subtle. I don't know if I would take that as strictly anti-trans though.
For Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't believe Buffalo Bill is trans, but it has been portrayed that way, and
Mhm.
people have taken it that way. And
I think it has
you
to
need
do
to be
with
more cognizant.
I think it has more to do with
Like
people
that.
taking it that way, because they do say outright in the movie that he's not actually transgender. He's just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
But it can also be implied, and sadly, people can.
I think it matters a lot. It doesn't. I'm very much, what's the word? A materialist, where intentions don't matter. It's what comes out of it is what matters. So if you they're not actually trans, but people take it as that's how they see a trans woman, then that's the objective reality of the situation. They see it as a trans woman, and they see it as a big issue. And like, oh, look at this disgusting trans woman trying to wear women's skin, and yeah.
Looking at like you got your own nostalgia image, but like then you're seeing like all these like changes, and you're feeling uncomfortable, and then you're like oh, that's uncomfortable and different from my nostalgia image. And I think it just
So I think people tend to hold nostalgia. It's a positive word. They tend to hold really dearly.
Mhm.
So when something attacks their nostalgia, it sets that fight mode.
I think that's a lot of like when we were talking about people's childhoods and everything like that, where they saw it through rose-colored glasses and everything, where that was their happy memories when they were a kid. So when you try to take that away, saying that's bad, they feel personally attacked, like you're trying to destroy their childhood, and that's not the situation a lot of the times. We're not saying you can't enjoy your past and everything like that. We're just I just would like to see lessons be learned from the past. It's not necessarily condemning those people for liking those things in the past.
You gotta be accepting and realize, like, you gotta be more progressive. Like, gotta look at things as, like, you know, society's always gonna be changing. Life's always gonna be changing. Things are always gonna be changing. It can be good and it can be bad, but you gotta accept at some point, like, you know, going back into your past image is probably not gonna fly, you know, in like today's society, whether you like it or not. Or like, you gotta understand that, like, you know, these changes is what, you know, helps us out and like at the end. And if you want to, I guess, quote unquote, make America great again, you gotta keep up with the times. You gotta look at everyone's perspective. You gotta work together. You gotta, like, understand the polarization and understand that, like, hey, you and I are not so different after all. Like,
I think that ties into a lot of just how globalized the world is and how more people are moving into cities and being around different cultures and experiencing those things. So a lot of people who look back on their past as being different from not having as much diversity, they sometimes attach to those ideals and everything like that. And we need to just realize we're all human. We have differences, but we need to respect those differences and learn from those differences and just learn to respect everyone.
I think jumping to a brighter note, though, it's along the lines with nostalgia. Why does, like, older music, like 90s, 80s, early 2000s, hit different now? Like, when you look at it back, you think on it very fondly, even though it might not have been a great song, but you listen to it and it's still a bop.
I think it's kind of like the simplistic, because, like, music is so complex now. You have so many different melodies, you have so many different tones and stuff like that, that, like, I sometimes listen to, like, you know, old school hip hop, and I just like how simple the beats are, how simple, like, everything's drawn out, and you're not using auto-tune. You're talking about actual relations instead of, like, oh, look at me with all my, you know, money and stuff like that, and
I think,
flexing.
especially with rap, I'm no expert on this, but obviously those came from disadvantaged communities, so they didn't have all the fancy tools of the more higher end studios, and so they kind of drew their sound from that simplistic what they have on hand to develop their sound. They didn't have as much money in it, but as rap music and other music, you know, like that has gained more popularity and more monetary support, there's been an increase to complexity and all these different sounds and everything like that.
I kind of want to get Landry's take on this, because even though you weren't born in that era, you still love music from the 70s, 80s, 90s. So that's another kind of nostalgia. Nostalgia, a lot of people think that it's the memories that you have, but nostalgia could also be a period that you didn't live in, but that you look back fondly and wish you could have experienced. So
It could be a
what's your take
culture.
on that?
So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm nostalgic for any past times. I mean, sometimes I am nostalgic for my own childhood, sure. And often I do wish that I could have been around to see maybe some of my favorite bands when they were at their peak. Like, seeing the Beatles would have been an amazing opportunity, or Led Zeppelin or something like that. But, you know, it's not like I want to go back in time and live in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm nostalgic for that. I just think I like the music. And part of that is that's how I grew up. I was started off on the Beatles from a young age, and I sort of moved around from there. But my taste has grown and changed as I've grown up. And I think maybe it's, you know, the roots of where I had my music taste started affected how I like music today. So I cannot listen to pop radio because everything sounds annoying to me. And I actually disagree with you, Brooke. I think it's way simpler now, and it irritates the hell out of me. I was
gonna say that.
Yeah, I hate minimalistic.
I also did a little bit of work in the music industry. It's a hell of a lot simpler now.
Okay.
I hate minimalistic instrumentation on a track. I mean, I like shoegaze, and that's about as chaotic as it gets.
I think what you hit on before a little bit with kind of separating you liking the music and liking the time period. It was really something we should really take from nostalgia. You
Right.
can enjoy stuff from the past, but that does not make the past better than today.
Exactly. And I think that, I mean, all you have to do to see the effect of nostalgia on people is you go to YouTube and look up any music video from before 1995 and just read the comments section. Because every person whose profile picture is them in a car seat with sunglasses on is going to be talking about how much better the past was than today. Was that a little too real?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let me show off my truck again.
Have it in black and white, you know, and you have some rockabilly playing in the background.
Oh God, rockabilly people are crazy to me.
When
That's
I was in
real
Tennessee,
music nostalgia.
I took a music business course, and one of the guys in there was a rockabilly artist, and he had the total Elvis look going on, and like slicked hair back, jet black.
See, that's like nostalgia on steroids, really, because none of that is actually true to the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all you have to do is look at it. I mean, nobody actually looked like that back in the day. It's a cartoonish version of that style. If anything, it's nostalgic for art and media than anything else, than any actual culture. And I mean, especially just look at how young most of these people are. They weren't around to be bikers in the 1950s. They just saw movies and were like, I have to have sideburns now.
That looks cool. I want that.
Yeah.
I also think just maybe like in terms of like the movie industry, maybe just they rehashed a lot of ideas so it doesn't feel as original with like some of like, you know, the movies that you're seeing now, or like they reference it to like older movies and they're like, well, this isn't new. And
This is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to movies. I'm not like, this is the reason why I came when you said, oh, the subject is nostalgia. Great, we're going to talk about movies. Because I am getting sick and tired of sequels, remakes, and adaptations and reboots in mainstream movies. And I
I
understand
think
why
the
they're
main
doing it.
reason with like the remakes is just because it's a more worthwhile investment.
Yeah,
for
it's a
Hollywood.
proven property.
Exactly.
That's why
it
that's why
already
they're
has
doing
a
it
built-in fan base.
On the business end, it's a safe investment. People are going to go see it. And they don't even have to make a good movie out of it.
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, look at Jurassic World.
Yeah.
It's such a passable movie. Like, I left the theater going, yeah, that was fine.
It was a movie.
It was a movie.
It's
They did
something I could
things.
watch while eating
I saw
popcorn.
dinosaurs.
Yeah. But everybody went to go see it. It was a box office success because it's Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
I mean, modern film business is not willing to give auteur directors a chance to do anything unless you're Christopher Nolan or Steven Spielberg,
Some
because
big
they
name.
have fan bases. If you aren't a proven investment, then they're not going to make your movie, which is why everything is so trapped in nostalgia in the movie business.
I wonder if that also has something to do with the tie into the rise of streaming, because I know that is an issue, especially in the music industry, where these record labels, they're not making nearly the amount of money they did in the 90s when the CDs were really big, so they want to only sign people who they know they can make a quick profit off of, who already has a substantial fan base, or that just has something going for them that they know they can make a quick profit.
Well, the music business is not going to be the same in 10 years.
So
Oh, I know.
this kind of this kind of actually hits the nail with a hammer on the nail with
It's nail on the head.
nail on the head.
There you go.
Nostalgia.
Got the right words, not in the right order.
But with a Scarlett Johansson with the new Black Widow movie, she actually did sue Disney, and if you recall, it's because they put like it on, what was it, Disney Plus, and she was supposed to get a certain percentage of like the actual like profits from the movie on like, you know, the movie theaters, but you know, because it's on the streaming services, it's gonna obviously divert the sales. So I think that's what like the lawsuit kind of hands down to. But yeah, like movie theaters just in general, like they've been taking a big L, and especially, well, even if it wasn't for COVID, like, you know, it was still going on like a long-term down, because you're seeing all these like, you know, streaming services, or you're seeing streaming services even take like movies and like just skipping like going to theaters and then going to like, you know, the rentals. It's just going straight to the streaming services instead, and you know,
It's definitely propelled by COVID, but I think, well, I can only speak for me personally, but I still enjoy going to movie theaters because it's an experience with
Yeah.
friends. It's something that we did in college every Tuesday, $5 movie nights, and it's something that I missed dearly throughout COVID and the pandemic, which we're still in, but we can go back to theaters now. So I've been back to the theaters.
I think it was
recently.
almost safer to go in peak COVID times, because I went like I think it was last December, or whenever, and it was just nobody was in the theater. There was maybe like 2 other people in the theater, so you just had the whole place to yourself. Everyone was spread out really far, so that was kind of nice. It was almost like you rented out the theater for just you and your friends for just only like $10 each.
And you can't beat that IMAX, you know, screen. The sound, you know, it's not
The whole
the same.
surround sound where the entire theater shakes. Yeah.
It's great, but that's the nostalgic memory. That's a good memory, and you know, like how do you carry that on to the next generation? Like, what's gonna happen to the creators? Like that's what I'm interested in, because you had a lot of people that came out of, you know, the 80s, 90s, 70s that are like larger than life. John Elton or Elton John, you know, Sting and all these other people. Jim Carrey was, you know, huge back in the 90s, and he's still big now, but it's like, what's the next generation going to look like of creatives? And how are they going to be looked on by that generation? Are they going to be admired the same way? Is it not going to just be TikTokers? Like, how is that going to be YouTube? Like, how is that going to look? Like, is John Paul, is that his name? The Paul brothers? Logan Paul, is he
Logan
gonna be
Jake and Logan Paul.
Jake and Logan Paul? Yeah, those fucks. Are they gonna be the next, you know, Jim Carrey, or you know, like, are like, because
I know Jake Paul was
that's
trying to
a
build like
sad
an empire.
yeah,
I think more than anything they're just focused on celebrity, like boxing and stuff like that. That's what
they're focusing on influence.
Yeah.
So they're focusing on
So my hope is that, and this is just wishful thinking on my part, my hope is that the collapse of the record industry and the conversion to streaming for a lot of things, which is probably going to cause the film industry to suffer, I'm hoping that's going to give rise to independent creators
What's the hope?
becoming bigger. That's the hope. And it could just result
The
in them not
problem
having a
is
platform.
most creators, like I said, I have experience in the music industry, so most of the money that musicians make is going to be through a record label, through like a starting bonus to give them the time they need to not have to work. They can just focus and take it like a month to work out an album and hopefully make sales from that. So the difficulty with being an independent artist without a record label is you don't have the same distribution, you don't have the same reach or anything like that. So if we want to see independence rise, we need to have some sort of funding for them.
Which is why Patreon is really very important. But
That's gonna be-
not a lot of people are
Yeah.
willing.
that's the thing. People want free.
Yeah.
They don't understand the value behind creation.
A lot of people don't realize just how hard it is to make certain things. Music is very hard. Movies is immensely hard. And there's so much work that goes into it, and for people to expect it to just be free is just interesting.
At the end of the day, I do think like it is good to have a certain amount of nostalgia, because again, the euphoria factor, and you know, a little bit of dopamine, and it's just kind of like what you kind of want to perceive your like life goals as. But at the same time, you don't want to have your entire mindset, your lifestyle, everything just set to your past, because we change as people. Like who I was like probably 5 years ago is different who I am now. Who I was like back in like my high school days is different from, you know, my current post college years. Like there's a lot of like change that happens with society, happens with yourself, happens with like everyone. You don't need to like constantly like be a reflection of everything you were like then, because people have different experiences. And I think like the problem with when and again we hit this point always, is just don't, the rose colored tinted glasses, it's the idea of like take your memories with a grain of salt. Not everything was as great as it seems, and you don't want to keep living them, because again, the past is the past, and you always got to look at that, like, you know, the present and the future, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. That's what will help us in our society and help us, like, you know, be better people. It's just keeping and moving forward, just like nature is. So.
Precisely. Beautiful. Beautifully said.
All right, let's roast Brooke.
All right. All right. So this is Brookside Chats. I'm your host, Brooklyn.
Your co-host, Taco.
I'm your honorary substitute co-host, Landry. Yeah.
And Aria.
All right. See you guys later.